So the new Samsung Galaxy S25 lineup is definitely impressive, but now more than any previous generation, Samsung kind of blurred the lines between the premium Galaxy S25 Ultra, the S25 Plus, and the much more affordable Galaxy S25 regular, making it much more difficult to decide which is actually the best one to get. They now have the same processor, the same RAM, a lot of the same specs, the same new AI features, and the differences are becoming more and more subtle. But there are still some differences that even weren't really mentioned in the keynote or the spec sheet. So I've been using all three of these phones for about a week now, and I wanted to answer the question, should you save $500 and get the smaller Galaxy S25, or is there still reason enough to splurge on the Galaxy S25 Ultra? Or maybe the middle child, maybe the S25 Plus is the perfect balance for you. Like I said, I've been using these for about a week now, and I wanted to dig into the differences and help you decide which is actually the best Galaxy S25 to buy. So let's start off with the most obvious difference being the size. The displays are going to be different on all of these. 6.9 inches on the Ultra, 6.8 inches on the Plus, and although the 0.1 inch difference doesn't sound like a big difference, when you're actually holding both these phones, the boxier corners on the Ultra make it feel a lot larger. It kind of digs into your palm a little bit more, making it, like I said, feel larger and a little bit less one-handed usable. The S25 regular is significantly smaller at 6.2 inches. And of course, with the larger display on the S25 Ultra and the Plus, you are getting a higher resolution display, but interestingly, out of the box, all three of these phones have exactly the same resolution. That's actually limited on the Plus and the Ultra, so all three of them are Full HD Plus, which is basically a 1080p display, which I think is very interesting. Of course, that is going to be helpful for battery life, but like the resolution is much more capable on the Plus and the Ultra. You can actually get QHD, which is significantly better than Full HD. However, you have to go into settings and actually change that. Now, I think a lot of people getting these phones won't even realize that it's disabled, and they won't go and change that setting, which kind of indicates that it's not as much of a difference. It's not really as important to have QHD as you might think. Like, most people probably can't really tell the difference. Now, technically, if you are looking at the displays, one last thing to note is that the S25 Plus, having the same resolution as the Ultra, but a smaller display, technically has better pixel density. So kind of a small win right there. Otherwise, they all have the same 120 hertz, the same peak brightness of 2600 nits. The bezels look a little bit different, but honestly, pretty similar in all of them. The rounded corners on the Plus and the regular are going to be the main difference. And of course, the weight is going to be different with all of these. So in English units, 7.7 ounces, 6.7 ounces, and 5.7 ounces going down the lineup. For my international friends out there, in metric, it's 218 grams, 190 grams, and 162 grams. I'll show that all on screen right here. Each one comes in 4 different colors plus some online exclusives. I don't really think there's a huge difference in preference there. Most people will probably put a case on anyway, but I will have a link down below to give you an enhanced trade-in credit, increase the storage, and they have other promos going on. So if you want to check out the colors, or if at any point in the video you decide which one you want and you want to order, check out the links down below. They are affiliate links that help the channel. But talking about the durability and the materials of these, the Ultra has a big advantage of being made of titanium, which kind of helps it to be larger and also not as much heavier as you might expect. Titanium on the outside should be more scratch resistant. It's a very strong metal, but also a very hard metal, whereas aluminum, very, very strong, but definitely a lot softer. So on the Plus and on the regular, I would expect if you don't put a case on this, it's very likely you'll be getting some scratches or some dings on that little, what they call armor aluminum around the outside, but it's still aluminum. It's gonna be a softer metal. We also have a difference in the glass. So the Ultra should have a slightly stronger glass, but more importantly, a more reflection resistant glass. So if you look at these two side by side, like I'll show you some B-roll of this. The Plus and the regular are gonna catch significantly more glare. It's one of my favorite features on the S24 Ultra from last year, and again on the 25. I think that's a big win. However, with this more glare-resistant display, sometimes it can get a little bit smudgy, so you either need to wipe it off all the time or cover it with another oleophobic layer. I find myself just wiping it off a lot. And before we get into the internals and the camera test between these three phones, one last thing I want to mention is going to be the Ultra, of course, has an S Pen. The S Pen no longer has Bluetooth capabilities, so you can't use it for air gestures or remote shutter. Honestly, I never use those anyway. Having a smartwatch, I use that for remote camera, but the S Pen still works to write and draw and do all the normal stuff. However, the Ultra has a much larger protrusion of the cameras on the back, which, as you can see, makes it wobble significantly more than the Plus and the regular. So if you're somebody that uses your phone on a flat table a lot, without a case, the wobble is definitely still there on the Ultra. But the S Pen is the S Pen, so I do like using that. I would recommend just getting a case so it's flat on the back, and it's really nice to use that. The other phones, unfortunately, don't have that. Inside these phones, they all have the Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy, and finally, that is available globally. I know last year, the Plus and the regular had Exynos processors, and only the Ultra was using Snapdragon globally, so I think a lot of people are going to be happy to see that for better power management, better performance, better thermals, like across the board. It's a really good processor for Android devices. They also all have the same AI features. I'll talk about those later in the video, but the charging is going to be different. 45 watts on the Ultra versus 25 watts on the regular and the Plus. Of course, the battery on the regular is still 4,000 milliamp hours, so about 20 to 25% less than the larger ones, but I think overall you will be getting a similar-ish battery life for pretty much all of these from my own testing. It depends on what you're doing with them. They do, however, which is very nice now, all have the same RAM. So regular had 8 gigs of RAM. Now all 3 of these have 12 gigabytes of RAM. So for gaming, for multitasking, for AI stuff, that's all going to be great. And before getting into the camera test, one last note with kind of the specs of these is going to be the storage and the pricing. So the base model starts at 128 gigabytes and goes up to 256, starting at $799. So definitely the cheapest of all of them, about $500 less than the Ultra. The Plus has more storage though, starts at 256 instead of 128, and it goes up to 512 gigs of storage. And keep in mind, none of these have expandable storage. You could get like cloud storage if you wanted, but I personally would rather have storage on the devices. And then the Ultra also starts at 256, but goes up to 512 or all the way up to 1 terabyte, and that is $12.99 as a starting price. But of course, like I mentioned, if you go through the links down below, there are some promos that'll bring you through Samsung's site. They'll automatically apply, and they should be giving you either extra storage or some extra credits to buy some other things. They change it from time to time, but check that out if you're interested. Finally, getting into the camera test and comparison, I kind of want to bundle the regular model and the Plus model into one. They have identical cameras, so to make it easier to compare, instead of 3 small photos, I'll just show 2. I'll use the Plus and I'll use the Ultra, and just know that the Plus and the base model are absolutely identical in camera performance. So between the Plus and the Ultra, let's start off with the similarities here. They do have the same 12 megapixel front-facing camera. They have the same 10 megapixel 3x telephoto lens, and those both do a decent enough job. I don't really care that much about the front-facing camera. There is a difference in the ultra-wide lens. It's 12 megapixels on the Plus and 50 megapixels on the ultra-wide, which not only gives you better, obviously, ultra-wide photos, but this also works for macro shots as well. So
now, as a quick side note, if you want to take macro shots, as you can see right here, you're just not going to be able to do that with the ultra-wide lens of the S25 Plus or the base model. And if you want to take macro shots on the Ultra, they're actually even better than they were before. So macro shots, huge win on the Ultra if you're into taking those.
And the wide-angle lens, you might kind of wonder why you would ever need 200 megapixels. If you're cropping in, of course, it is going to be better, but 200 megapixels versus 50 megapixels should also have a significantly better low-light performance, as you have more pixels to bin together, capturing more light, and ultimately giving you a better low-light photo. And of course, the main bonus on the Ultra is going to be that periscope lens on the bottom, as you can see there. That's kind of what makes the camera stick out so far. It's a very large lens, 5x telephoto lens. It's a 50 megapixel lens as well, so you can zoom in up to 100x. Not particularly useful at 100x, but hey, if you want to zoom into 20 or 50x, you're still getting a pretty decent shot there. And you might be wondering what the 5th lens is on the back. That is just a little laser for depth, so kind of autofocus is really what it's meant for. It's not really making a huge difference in my experience, but it is nice that it does exist there in case you ever want any app in the future that's going to kind of like map a room or do other things like that. VR type stuff, I think, would maybe benefit from that. So a couple more sample shots here. You can leave a comment down below and let me know which one you think looks the best. Also, of course, portrait mode is going to be a little bit different on these, even though they are all running with the same processor and a lot of the same features on the inside. All right, so let's get into a quick little video test right here. Starting off, this is the rear lens, the primary rear camera. If you're doing any kind of vlogging, this is what it would look and sound like. I have HDR disabled, and this is currently recording in 4K 30, although you can do 4K 60 and 8K 30 as well. But I want to show you something with the zooming with this. So if I just turn it around, the audio is going to get a little bit strange because it's doing a focused audio zoom. But if I use the smooth slider, first of all, I think it looks really good, really a nice way to kind of transition. But look at the transition there between lenses. It's really subtle between the ultra wide and the primary lens right there, you barely even notice that transition. So it does exist, but I think compared to the previous generations, that's really quite impressive. You can zoom all the way out to the ultra wide right here, much more stable, but the color science looks very consistent. Now let's zoom in on this book over here, and you'll see right there we go to, that was a little jumpier that time, but we go to the primary lens, and then with the S25 Ultra, you'll have a jump at 3x. So coming up on it right now, you'll see that's a jump to the next telephoto lens. And then another jump at 5x. So right there, that one's a much more significant jump. I have to tap to focus on the book back there. And we can actually zoom up to the 20x. So that's where you'll see the main difference between the Ultra and the Plus is going to be when you really zoom in. But the max zoom, again, is only 20x on this and 12x on the base model and on the Plus. But let's get into a video test with that and see what the differences actually are. Getting into a video test with the S25 base model or the Plus, they're both, like I said, the same. You'll see in the zooming in a second that it is a little bit different. Another difference is when you're holding the phone, because it is smaller, you're more likely to be covering up the microphones, which are on the top and the bottom of the phone. When you're holding it horizontal, it's going to be the sides of the phone, obviously. Whereas with the Ultra, it's so much larger and pointier. I feel like I can much more easily hold it without ever covering up those microphones. So let's get into that zooming. Like I said, we do still have the smooth zoom. So going out to the ultra wide here, pretty smooth transition there. Zooming in on that book over there again, kind of a slight jump. Let's do that one more time. You'll see between the ultra wide and the primary, the slower you go, seems like it's a little bit more subtle. Now let's zoom all the way in, and you only have one jump here to the 3x. Right there. It doesn't really move it quite as much, but you will see a difference in resolution, which is pretty stark. And then, of course, zooming all the way in, it maxes out at 12x right here, and that is really not nearly as good as the S25 Ultra. But the primary lens is definitely comparable in bright light. In low light, again, the S25 Ultra has a larger sensor and is going to do a little bit better there with the primary lens. There are a number of new features on the 25 lineup this year. Some of them may be rolled back to the 24 and older models in the future, but one, for example, is going to be the smooth zoom. So if you're in video mode, you can tap on the right and you're able to zoom in very smoothly. Kind of a nice feature for video. We also have the ability to shoot in RAW now, so if you want to do your own color grading later, that's a nice feature that is available on many other phones, and finally, on Samsung phones as well. Some other specs that are the same with these, finally, they all have Wi-Fi 7 on all three models, but one thing that nobody talks about, you don't really see it on the spec sheets unless you really dig for it, and that is the S25 base model. Out of these three, the only one that does this is the base model. It lacks ultra wideband. So if you have a Samsung tag, like a Tag Plus, something that is able to use precision finding, you can't do that with an $800 S25 base model. I don't know why they excluded that, if that's like a space thing in here, they don't have room for it or something, or just cost cutting, but you're not able to do that kind of ultra wideband locating. So if that's something you care about, that's just unfortunately not there. All three of these do have 7 years of updates. They all have a lot of the same new AI features like I talked about in my original reviews of them. I'm not gonna really go through all of those right now because, like I said, it's not really a difference between these. They have AI select and, of course, circle to search with sound as well. A lot of the same stuff that you would expect to see with the new Galaxy AI things. Some of them are really useful, some of them are gimmicks. The one that I've really been using is the Now Brief or the Now Bar, kind of summarizing your day, connecting to your wearables, summarizing your sleep, different things like that. So kind of concluding with all three of these phones, I think power users, without a doubt, are going to really like the better cameras and the S Pen on the Ultra. I mean, I personally really like those features. That's the main reason that I would be using the Ultra over the others. However, I have to say I really am a sucker for getting the best features in the smallest package. So the S25 regular just feels nice in your hand. It's a good size. It's very usable. It's still a great phone, but I feel like Samsung just really throttled it by not giving it a better telephoto camera this year. I think if this had a 5x periscope lens on here, this would be the Android phone to beat in 2025. Samsung didn't do it. I think that it feels like a garbage 3x lens they've had for 4 years now. I don't know why Samsung didn't upgrade that, but all things considered, it's still a really solid phone. The other differences, like the faster charging, sure, that's great on the Ultra, it's a nice perk, but I don't think that's reason enough to upgrade. Same thing with the higher resolution display, not really reason enough to upgrade. The anti-reflective display, is nice until you put a screen protector on. If you do that, it kind of negates it, unfortunately. But for me, I'm gonna have to go with the Ultra for the better cameras and the S Pen. But let me know which of these you like best in the comments below, and I will actually be comparing these to other great Android phones, including the Pixel and the OnePlus. That video is coming out very soon, so be sure to get subscribed so you don't miss that one. Thanks for watching. I'm Michael Bryan, and I'll see you in that comparison.